and we say to the world that we have not yet reached the stage at which we can undertake violence, take up arms against the forces that are opposed to Islam. We are at stage 1 or stage 2, but definitely a time will come when we will engage in offensive jihad against the rest of the world. Then the rest of the world is perfectly legitimate, is justified in taking a preemptive strike against the Muslims so as not to entertain the future possibility of being attacked when the Muslims are in power or in a position. So here gives the perfect legitimacy to George W. Bush to attack the Muslims.
Well, he got the legitimacy by himself, without any provocation from the Muslims.
No, I'm just
actually,
but asking you to consider the consequences.
Yes, yes. A difference should be made between what happened during the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what can happen today. The spreading of the message of Islam in those days couldn't be by any other means except conquering. Today you have television, you have all communications, you can spread the message of Islam, and if you can show an example of political socio-economic system of Islam, that would be the best of propagation.
That's where I wanted you to come, and my question was, is it
regarding the life of the Prophet?
Yeah.
We shouldn't distort it.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it possible to establish the socio-economic and political justice without using violence? In other words, is it possible to establish an Islamic social order through democratic peaceful means?
If by democratic peaceful means you mean elections, etc., my answer is no, not at all. These democratic peaceful means, they are held, elections are held to run a system, not to change the system. The power bases in this society, they will be reflected in the elections. The elections might be very transparent, but the power structure, the landlords, the moneyed people, they will come there and they will try to have a status quo. So actually this is not the way. But I told you that it is not necessary that you go to war. A peaceful agitation, a peaceful mass movement. But for that peaceful mass movement you need a very strong, integrated, disciplined party first of all, which can control the mass movement. The mass movement otherwise can be hijacked by any person who raises a louder slogan, unless you have this backbone of that mass movement is a very strong, disciplined party. Hizbullah, as Quran says it, the party of Allah.
I would like to make one comment about Al-Arab urban dichotomy in early Islam, as well as the urban Bedouin dichotomy in the contemporary Muslim world, a comparative outlook in brief. As you correctly said, the Quran is severely critical of Al-Arab in many of the Quranic verses because originally they disobeyed, etc., etc. But one could say that, one could take that as a lack of harmony in early Arabia, early Islamic Arabia, between urban Islam and non-Islamic desert, so to speak. And that's why Al-Arab were violence was used against them, in a sense, by the urban Muslims to integrate them. But if we look at what we call the Gulf states in the past 50 years, since the beginning of the Cold War at the end of the 1940s, we can see that the Gulf states, because of petroleum, have been integrated into the international capitalist market. And we can see the consequences, where now tribal leaders are in power, and they have been in power for centuries, in the case of Saudi Arabia, since the end of the 18th century. This is true in Jordan. It is the same family, the same tribe. It is true in Egypt, the same tribe or the president. It is true in Morocco. So here the tribes seem, after 14th century of Islamic progress, seem to have overcome their problem of urbanism by controlling the urban side of Islam, so to speak. Do you see what I mean? That initially urban Muslims attacked the Arab, whereas nowadays the Arab are in fact,
they attacked Arab. How?
that the Quran is critical of the Bedouins.
Critical, because you know there was lack of training for them.
Right.
The people at Medina, they had the companionship of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Right.
So that is why Quran says that it's not necessary that all the Bedouins should come to Medina to learn Deen. So that was the proposal given by Allah.
I don't disagree with that, but what I'm trying to say is that in the contemporary period, in the past 50 years or so, it is the Arab who have come from the desert, who have overcome urban Islam and who are in control.
It's not Arab, it's oil. It's only oil and nothing else. And then education is widespread. Or living in very far off corners, they are getting education.
It's propagating Bedouin philosophy.
Okay.
When you were talking about your second group of jihad, the struggle against the intellectual, where you use arguments, the use of the sermon for those who are non-intellectual so you can touch the heart.
Yes.
And then you talked about dialogue for those of other faith traditions in other religions. You talked there about the fact that the goal must be defeat. You use the word defeat, I think, of other religious traditions. And I assume what you mean by that is that because Islam's true, you've got to persuade the Jew, persuade the Christian, persuade the Hindu of the truth of Islam, and in that sense those religions should disappear. And that's fair enough. Is there anywhere in your theology the idea that perhaps God has given to the Christian, to the Hindu, to the Sikh, to the Baha'i, an insight that Muslims can learn from? Is there anything that perhaps Muslims should absorb, much the same way as Aristotle was used by Al-Ghazali? Is there anything that can be used from other traditions to shape their current understanding of what the truth of the world is and God's relations with that world?
First of all, this debate, the third level, I said those people who are paid for this purpose.
Who are what?
Who they are paid. They are professionals. The missionaries and these, and the Baha'is and Qadianis. So we have to silence them by argument, by debate. They are not going to listen to any argument, etc., etc., but debate, just as Ahmad Didas has done. But this is not dawah. This is not the calling towards Islam. Calling towards Islam is two levels, at the intellectual level, at the common level. The common level, who don't have any false ideology in their minds, sermon will do. But these people who are there to lead people astray, they have to be met in their own elements, and that is debate, and prove them to be wrong.
Now, let's just clarify this. So they need to be silenced. People who are paid, like me, as a Christian theologian, should be silenced, believing other people
are you a missionary?
Well,
you are like an imam.
No.
An imam can be paid.
Well, just like you.
He is not paid.
No, that's right. I don't get paid very much. But just like you, I believe Christianity is true. And you believe Islam's true. And I believe at the end of the age, Muslims will learn that they were mistaken. And you believe at the end of the age, Jesus will tell me that I was mistaken. And at the end of the age, you and I will meet and talk and we'll